Hello, Internet. It is I, Malik Aaron, and welcome back to Box Office Recaps. So, this is part two of my 2023 recap. Part one, I went over all the movies that I thought were successful, that I thought did well for themselves. And this video is the opposite of that. Because instead of talking about movies that were successful, we're going to talk about movies that did terrible, that completely underwhelmed, bombed, flop, any negative word you can use. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. And I'm not going to be going over every single movie in detail because that would take way too long. So I'm going to go over like the major stuff, the movies that really just flopped real hard. Like that's what I'm going to be doing. So let's get started. January, nothing really major happened, so I'm just going to skip past it. Skipping past January to February, nothing really notable here either, except for one movie. Ant-Man 3, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Oof. Okay. So, with this, I thought it would at least make Ant-Man 2 money. Like, that's what I thought, before it released. Because the Ant-Man movies, they're very much, like, pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to the MCU. But they still do all right. Like, they don't make, like, a small amount of money. The first Ant-Man made, like, 500 mil. Second one, 600 mil. So there's definitely an audience for it. Not a huge audience. Not an enormous audience, but there's still something. So I thought Ant-Man 3 would make about as much as Ant-Man 2. Maybe like a bit of a bump domestically. And with its opening weekend, that's what I thought would happen. Because the open of 106 million, which is quite a bit higher than Ant-Man and the Wasp's 75 million. So I thought it would probably end at like 250 or something. That's what I thought. That did not happen at all. This movie had a short life, to say the least. It opened big and it crashed hard, falling 70% in week 2, which at the time was the biggest drop ever for an MCU movie, a record that would be broken later on that year by a movie that I'm pretty sure you all know what it is, but we'll talk about it much later. But yeah, after that, it just crashed and crashed and crashed, and it ended up making less than Ant-Man 2 domestically, despite opening quite a bit, with quite a bit more. And worldwide, it was even worse. It was the worst performing Ant-Man movie, period, worldwide. Like, it overseas, it did not click, not one bit. So, yeah, made less than 500 million. Compared to the other two movies, it looks bad. Compared to the MCU as a whole, it looks bad. I mean, not the worst, far from the worst, but still, it doesn't look good. So, I mean, like, looking at Ant-Man Quantumania, like, it's on the same level as Internals and Shang-Chi. That's not exactly a group I want to be associated with. It made it on the same level as, like, the first Thor. And that was before anyone really knew who Thor was. I mean, people knew who Thor was, but he wasn't, like, uber popular like he is now. So, yeah, big old step back for Marvel with Ant-Man 3. And I saw the movie, and let me tell you, it took me weeks to watch it. I had to will myself to watch it because word of mouth was bad, man. I heard some bad things about this movie. But I said, you know what? It's a Marvel movie. I've watched a ton of them. I might as well watch this too. Man, that was a huge mistake. Let me tell you. I don't think I've ever seen a movie where I felt so lifeless. Like, I felt nothing for anything. Like, it was just a total waste of time. It was a total waste of my life. And it just made me question why I even watch Marvel movies in the first place. Like, it was really bad. I would not recommend it to anyone. And it's also the fact this movie is now aged pretty horribly because of Kang here, Jonathan Majors. And, like, he was, like, the selling point for this movie because Jonathan Majors Kang was supposed to be, like, the big bad of the MCU. And I know he was, like, in Loki, the show, but this is his first time in a movie. So he was, like, the selling point. And it was supposed to lead to, like, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars and all that. But as you know, Jonathan Majors, after Creed 3 came out, shit hit the fan real bad with him. You know, he got arrested, then a big old legal battle ensued, the big old legal situation, and then the verdict came out that he was guilty apparently of harassment, and then he lost his Marvel gig. Kang is no more unless they recast him. I don't think anyone's gonna jump at the chance to be Kang. So yeah, Avengers 5 is pretty much just had to be like reworked completely. So, and plus like the end credit scene for this, we have all bunch of Jonathan Majors everywhere, a bunch of Kangs around. Yeah, that's aged like milk. So yeah, ugh, this movie was a mistake. Don't expect Ant-Man 4 anytime ever. That's all I'll say. And this is only like the tipping point. This is like the start of what was a truly awful year for the superhero genre. Like, this is just like the starting point of an absolute of a total shit show. Okay. But even then, this is one of the more successful superhero movies of 2023, which should really tell you just how bad 2023 was for the genre. So yeah, Ant-Man 3 was the first real major flop of the year. And now we're going to move on to the second big flop of the year. I mean, I know Operation Fortune did bad, but no one really cared about that. I'm still pissed that making that video, that prediction video I made for it, got me a bullshit copyright strike. I'm still mad about that. That shouldn't have happened at all. So I will forever hold a grudge against that movie. And then 65, like, wasn't like a huge movie, but it was still an embarrassing flop. But what we're really going to talk about next is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Look at that, another superhero movie. And our first of 4 DC movies I'm going to be talking about in this video, because you probably know this, but 2023 was probably the worst year in DC movie history. Like, maybe worse than 97, when you had, like, Batman, Robin, and Steel. It's probably worse than that. But yeah, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the sequel to Shazam. I thought it would do okay-ish. I was expecting it to do great, but I thought it would at least do all right. Maybe do slightly worse than the first movie. That would open with like 40, 50 million, something like that. Make like over 100 million. Make like 300 million total. And just do just moderate, just meh business. This movie wishes it did meh business, because it did god awful instead. Almost $30 million. I mean, for a movie that costs 125 million, that's awful. And sure, Wonka opened with 39 million, but that was during the holidays. So opening weekends weren't, during the holidays, they're not so important. But this was like in March, so it was important to open strong, and it definitely didn't do that. I mean, compared to the first movie, it opened like so much lower, almost like, just over half. So that's bad. But guess what? It got even worse. Way worse. Fell 69% the next weekend. So it just died. It died so fast, even faster than Ant-Man. Literally, it didn't even double its opening weekend. Like, that's when you know, like, it is truly over. So only made like 57 million domestically, barely higher than Shazam's opening weekend. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, look at this. Look, it's open with 53.5 million. Shazam 2 made 57 million total. Look at that. Embarrassing. Even more embarrassing, its worldwide total was less than the first movie's domestic total. Like, god damn. What went wrong? Well, what went wrong with this is something that went wrong with all of the DC movies this year. Is the fact that the DCU was already dead. It was, killed off thanks to James Gunn and Peter Safran starting like the DCU, which is going to start in 2025 with Superman Legacy. That automatically made every DC movie coming out last year worthless. Absolutely worthless. They weren't going to lead to anything. They meant nothing to no one, and there was no point in watching any of them. And so no one watched any of them. I know I didn't. I skipped out on all of them because there was just no point. And apparently the movie wasn't even that good in the first place. So yeah. And the thing is with like the first Shazam, like it did all right. It got a lot of audience enthusiasm, but no one was really like jumping up and down for more for like a sequel. Like, I never really saw that hype, that true hype for a sequel. It never really materialized. So that's probably another explanation of why this didn't land. So yeah, Shazam 2, huge bomb. But it's not the it won't be the last DC bomb you're going to be seeing in this video because we got three more. So moving right along to, oh, this is a sad one. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This makes me sad because I saw this movie and I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was, had a strong cast. I thought, the movie was quite funny at parts and not like unintentionally funny, like more genuinely funny. And I thought the movie just had a good vibe and I really enjoyed it. So it makes me sad to talk about it in this video. But yeah, I was never sure about this movie's financial chances because like Dungeons and Dragons, it's like a big brand. Everyone knows what it is, but like the people who are gonna watch this movie the people who are most likely gonna watch this were hardcore Dungeons and Dragons fans. Like this movie had to figure out how to appeal to people outside of that bubble and never did that really. It didn't help that the trailers were kind of lackluster. It kind of just felt like Guardians of the Galaxy, but in a fantasy setting, which sounds great, but it kind of looked like a bad version of Guardians of the Galaxy, at least when it came to the trailers. And the movie cost way too much, 150 million. Like this movie needed to make some big money if it was gonna, start a franchise, and it just didn't. Only made like 200 million worldwide, 93 million domestically. And the thing is, I thought it would do better because word of mouth was spreading like before it came out, and it was really good. I thought that would really help the movie, give it a bit of a boost, and it just didn't happen. So yeah, this performance is really sad because I really enjoyed the movie. We're not going to get a sequel, which sucks, but hey, it happens sometimes. Like good movies flop. It's sad, but it happens. Okay. And it won't be the only good movie I'm going to be talking about in this video that deserved better but didn't get better. It didn't get anything good. So yeah, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Definitely a tragic failure. I can definitely see it getting a cult following in the future, though. I think it has potential to get that at least. So yeah, we're gonna move on. I'm not gonna talk about Air because with Amazon, like the movie cost like 90 million, and I might as well just show you only made like 89 million. The thing is that Amazon, it wasn't about box office. It was basically a publicity thing. Very much what happened from Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon from Apple, where box office is irrelevant. What matters is that people see it in theaters, and that leads to publicity when it eventually hits streaming. So that's why I'm not talking about it in detail. Renfield, I guess I can talk about this. I mean, it was expensive enough. I thought this movie would do well. I wasn't too sure about this either because, I mean, it had like Nicolas Cage as Dracula, and I thought that was like a really great idea, and I thought maybe people would get a kick out of it, but apparently, like it only appealed to like internet people, like most of like the mainstream public. They just didn't care at all, and the movie just died. It did awful. Only opened for like 8 million, made like 17 million total. 26 million worldwide on a budget of 86 million. That's a big old yikes. And I wanted to see it, but I didn't. It just didn't happen. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong, except I guess this movie would only appeal to like hardcore Nicolas Cage fans, I guess. And monster movies, they don't do that great, especially a live action monster movies, like the MonsterVerse, if you will, like Universal's MonsterVerse of like Dracula and Frankenstein, and shoot, what else? Mummy and all that. Yeah, this movie, it's a total flop, hard flop. What else is there? Okay, so that's nothing really else to really talk about in April. Nothing like big. So now we move on to May. Hypnotic, there's no real point in talking about that. I mean, it was doomed from the beginning. It never stood a chance. But what I will talk about is Fast X. Let's discuss it. Fast X, the 10th Fast and the Furious, well, 11th if you count Hobbs and Shaw, but the 10th mainline movie in the series. So I expected this to do really well because it's Fast and the Furious. I mean, these movies like post Fast Four, well, it's called Fast and Furious, which is kind of confusing. But I'm gonna call it Fast Four. After that, the series like hit the big time. Like Fast Five, Six, Seven, Fate, all of them made big money. With Furious 7 making the most, 1.5 billion, and Fate and Furious made 1.2 billion. Hobbs and Shaw did okay, but F9, the previous Fast and Furious movie, obviously that movie was handicapped because it suffered because of COVID. Because it was one of the first major victims of COVID, where it was supposed to come out in like May of 2020, and COVID made that just not happen at all. So it got delayed by a whole year. So, and when the movie was coming out, like theaters were starting to get going again, kinda. They're really trying to, become, what's the word? What's the saying? Like they tried to, you know, damn, I can't think of it right now. But they tried to come back. They tried to come back from the grave. There we go. Tried to come back from the grave. And then there was the whole John Cena Taiwan debacle thing that happened. So there was a lot going against F9. But considering all those circumstances, it still did all right. It still made enough money to justify another one. So I thought Fast X would do better because it didn't have any of those disadvantages. But it did worse. It opened worse with 67 million. It made worse did worse domestically, under 46 million, which I believe is the fourth worst performing movie in the series. The only ones that did worse were the first three Fast and the Furious movies, but when it comes to ticket sales, it's the second worst, only in front of Tokyo Drift. Worldwide made about the same amount of money as F9, which doesn't seem bad, but here's the thing. The budget for this movie was stupid, man. 340 million production budget. Not even marketing costs. That's just production budget, man. That's more than what most movies make, worldwide. Like that's insane that it costs that much. So this movie needed to make $1 billion just to be financially solid, and it didn't even get close to that. So, ugh. So I definitely wouldn't call it a hit at all. And I saw the movie, and it's basically more Fast and Furious. Like it was basically what you would expect, just a bunch of dumb action with a bunch of actors, big time actors in it. And it was very stupid, but it was kind of enjoyable type of stupid. And Jason Momoa, he was the highlight of the movie for me. Like he was great. Really enjoyed him. But yeah, the movie was just more Fast and the Furious. Like it's one of those series where like if you're in, you're in. Like if for anyone who's not in, this is not going to convince anyone to, to get in to the franchise. Like it's just not. But as a movie, I thought it was all right for what it was. But box office wise, it is not a hit. And if I were Universal, I would just make Fast 11 and be done with the series. Just be done. Just let it die. Let it go and let it ride into the sunset. That's what I would suggest. So yeah, Fast X was a flop. But it was far from the biggest flop of the year. It's the highest grossing flop of the year. So it has that going for it. at least worldwide. But domestically, the highest grossing flop of the year was The Little Mermaid. Let's talk about this. So, Little Mermaid 2023, the remake of the original from 1989. Now, this movie got a lot of, talk online because of, the fact that they made Ariel black. Pretty much that. It's like the main reason. There's also the fact that a lot of like the characters in the movie, a lot of the sea life, just look. It went for like that realistic look that the Lion King remake used, and it didn't work for that. It didn't work for this either because they took like these cartoonish characters and made them realistic, and they looked horrifying. Honestly, just like that crab, like that's supposed to be Sebastian, and he just a normalized crab, like that fish right there next to Ariel. It's supposed to be like, is that Flounder? Is that his name? Flounder, I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Flounder. And I'm just like, what even is this? Like it looks bad. And people like complained about how dark the movie looked, like when it comes to lighting, like it looked way too dark. Like, where's the vibrant colors and everything? So yeah, this movie had a lot going against it. The internet was not a fan of this movie at all. And when it came out, like, here's the thing. Domestically, this movie did all right. Like, it didn't do bad. Like, it opened with like 95 million and it made almost 300 million domestically. That's not a bad haul at all for, its domestic run. What was bad was its international run. It completely just tanked there. Made less than its domestic run, only made like 568 million worldwide, barely doubling its budget. So I can't really call that a hit, especially compared to other Disney remakes that we've had. Like say Aladdin, for example. The Aladdin 2019 movie that did better domestically, but it did way better internationally. Like, look at that. It made more internationally than Little Mermaid made total. Like, and it made $1 billion. And other movies like Beauty and the Beast made $1 billion. Lion King made well past $1 billion. Like, this looks so weak compared to them. So yeah, like nothing else really to say, but it was a bit of a dud. Worldwide, it was a dud, but domestically, it did okay. But overseas, caused this movie to sink into the depths. So, yeah. Nothing else really to say about Little Mermaid. So, we're moving on to June. June was a bad month for movies. Let me tell you, it was awful. The only highlight was Across the Spider-Verse. After that, it was just a complete plummet when it comes to success. So Transformers Rise of the Beast, that's our next movie we're going to be talking about. So Transformers, this series has definitely seen better days, let me tell you, especially when it comes to box office. Like, these movies started out so big back in like the late 2000s and the early 2010s. They were massive. They were big event movies, even though objectively they weren't all that good. Some were just straight trash, but they made a lot of money. A whole lot of money. I mean, yeah, the first one made over 300 million domestically, 700 million worldwide. That's a lot for a non-sequel. Revenge of the Fallen did even better, made 800 million. Dark of the Moon made well past $1 billion. Same goes for Age of Extinction. So things were going fantastic, but then everything went wrong with The Last Night. People finally had enough of Transformers. They finally, they were willing to turn off their brains for the previous 4 Transformers movies. By the 5th one, those brain cells started to redevelop, and they were like, you know what? We deserve better. We deserve better than this trash. And it did awful. It tanked. It lost money. And it seemed like Transformers was kind of doomed after that. But then you had Bumblebee come out a year later. And people were like, oh my god, a Transformers movie that's good? Is that even possible? And Bumblebee, it did worse than Last Night, but it cost way less. So the bar for success was a lot lower. So it was able to be a success. So that was like the new direction with Bumblebee. And Rise of the Beast is supposed to be a sequel to that. And weirdly enough, it did better domestically than the previous 2 Transformers movies, but it did worse internationally. and as a result, it did worse worldwide than both of them. So it's the worst performing Transformers movie ever. Considering the budget was 195 million, that's no good. That's no good at all. So I don't know what you can do really with Transformers at this point with the live action movies. I know there's supposed to be an animated movie later this year, Transformers 1. But with the live action movies, I feel like I feel like you're better off just letting it die, just letting it fade away. But they won't do that. They're probably just gonna make another reboot or something, like another new direction. And it's just, and I'm just like, guys, just give up, just throw in the towel, just admit that you got nothing. And this was a movie that I wanted to see, but then eventually I was just like, nah, I don't think so. So I just didn't. Um, so Transformers: Rise of the Beast, technically one of the more successful flops, but it's still a flop at the end of the day. But it looks massive, absolutely massive in comparison to The Flash. Let's talk about that. So this is our second DC movie of the year to discuss. With The Flash, there's so much to talk about, man. I could go on and on and on about all the problems with this movie. I'm just gonna give you the cliff notes. So with The Flash, like all the other DC movies this year, it suffered from being completely irrelevant, from being completely worthless, thanks to the upcoming DCU reboot. So I deal with that. There's also the fact that Ezra Miller. There's the fact that no one really liked Ezra Miller's Flash to begin with, but Ezra Miller, as you know, they made some headlines the last few years. All the worst headlines, about them being just a total menace to society, getting arrested multiple times, apparently allegedly being a groomer, some bad shit. So you gotta deal with all that negative PR and the fact that they were willing to keep going with this movie when they really should have probably just canceled it. But they're like, no, we've spent too much money. We already filmed it. We might as well go through with it. We might as well release it. And they did. And boy, that was a bad decision. And then there's also the fact that this movie kind of felt like No Way Home. Like, it very much felt like No Way Home. I don't think that was the intention, but it felt like that. It felt like the poor man's No Way Home was like Spider-Man. The thing was with Spider-Man, you had like 3 generations of Spider-Man like teaming up, and it was like a dream for a lot of people, including me. But for this, you had like, Michael Keaton's Batman, which was cool, but I didn't grow up with Michael Keaton's Batman, so it didn't really hit with me. But hit with a lot of people. Like I still remember that first trailer, like looking at the comment section, almost every single comment was about Michael Keaton's Batman. I'm not making that up. I scrolled through it. Almost all of them were about him. So it seemed like he was going to be the draw for the movie. And he wasn't in the end. And then there's also the fact that this movie was like another like big old multiverse movie where you had like General Zod from like Man of Steel. And then you had like a bunch of cameos from like a bunch of other DC movies. And then you had some that were just absolutely just foul when it comes to morality. Resurrecting like dead actors, like Christopher Reeves resurrecting him. That's just like so gross and ghoulish, and people rightfully called that out. So yeah, that little issue. And then there's also what I found really weird was how Warner Brothers, like David Saloff and James Gunn and all of them, they were trying to like hype this movie up so much. Like saying it was the greatest superhero movie of all time. They were getting people who weren't even involved in the superhero genre to talk about, like Stephen King and Tom Cruise. It was really weird. Like that told me that things were not right. Something was wrong. Something felt very off with that. That was a red flag. And when the movie came out, like it was expected to open with like 80 million, and it only opened with like 55 million. And then it crumbled real quick. It like had an opening day of like 24. Well, that Thursday preview 9.7. That was like the first sign of disaster. and then it just got worse after that. 24 million opening day, fell 36 million the next day, fell 1% Sunday. That's only because of Father's Day. And then after that, it was over. It literally, by the time you got to Wednesday, it was already behind not just Spider-Verse, but also Elemental, a movie that opened even worse than The Flash. It opened even worse, and it ended up making way more in the end. But yeah, Flash fell 72% the next weekend, then fell another 65% the next weekend after that, and it was just gone by mid-July. And only made like 108 million domestically. One just would say that it should have opened with that much. It should have opened with more than that, but that's how much it made total domestically. Worldwide wasn't much better. It made 266 million on a budget of 200 million. Awful. Absolutely awful. Absolutely just horrendous. And it looks so much worse in comparison to so many other superhero movies. It's insane. It's literally had like a Dark Phoenix level performance, like worldwide. If anyone remembers Dark Phoenix, if you don't remember Dark Phoenix, good, deserves to be forgotten. But yeah, The Flash, I didn't see it mainly because, well, one, it was irrelevant, and two, Ezra Miller, I didn't want to see anything with Ezra like that. Like it would have felt wrong to watch it because of Ezra, so I just didn't. And I made the right call because I heard the movie wasn't even good to begin with. So, yeah, The Flash, it definitely earned its fate. It earned its flop. I'm glad it flopped. It deserved it. Absolutely. So, yeah, nothing else to say about The Flash, but it was a total disaster. But it was a disaster that I watched, and I ate popcorn the whole time watching it. I didn't watch the movie, but I watched its failure unfold, from a distance. So now we move on. Oh boy, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I have a feeling most of you probably forgot this movie even came out. I wouldn't be surprised because, this movie, it was doomed from the get-go for several reasons. One, the previous Indiana Jones movie was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull back in 2008, and that movie wasn't received well by fans, even though it was a big hit in terms of box office. Fans trash that movie all the time. Most people say it jumped the shark. Well, an intellectual would say it nuked the fridge. And yeah, it was kind of, most people saw that movie as a mistake. And so when they announced Indy 5, the least you would hope for is that it would be better than Indy 4, but that didn't happen. And so it had to deal with the problem of, being the sequel to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. There's also the problem that Lucasfilm, their reputation have tanked, absolutely tanked in the last few years, especially, it started with Star Wars, where it was going fine from like Force Awakens and Rogue One. It was going good. And then everything took a hard left turn with Last Jedi, and then it only got worse from there. With like Solo, the big old failure with that, and then Rise of Skywalker being a total disaster of a movie. Even though it made $1 billion, it was still an awful movie. And then like now Star Wars now is just a bunch of Disney Plus shows. It just feels worthless. So yeah, like the Lucasfilm well, I wouldn't even say it is in a bad place. But it was definitely in a bad place when Indiana Jones 5 was coming out, but it ended up being in a worse place afterwards. So you had the Lucasfilm's tarnished reputation. There was also the fact that this movie tried to play like Indy's back, but I'm like, you already played that card with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. You can't play the same card twice. You can't do that. So yeah, just trying to do the same thing again, like with diminishing returns. So try to strike. It's like having lightning strike twice, and that refused to happen. And then there's also the fact that this movie had like an early release, an early premiere. It premiered like in May at Cannes, like the Cannes Film Festival. And usually that's a way to like get advanced buzz for a movie. Like ideally, your movie's good. You premiere it early, you get advanced buzz, and that buzz, grows and grows and grows until a movie actually comes out to the public. That did not happen at all. This movie had awful reviews after Cannes. I'm just like, well, good job, Disney. You killed this movie before it even released. Congratulations. So, yeah, there's that too. And when the movie came out, it bombed bad. It only opened with like 60 million, which was way worse than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Just for a comparison's sake. But I gotta find it though. Actually, I'll just go to Indiana Jones. That'll be easier. But yeah, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, despite its reputation, this movie was a huge hit though. It made money. I think it was the second biggest movie of 2008, only behind The Dark Knight. But yeah, it opened with like 25 million on a Thursday, made over 100 million that weekend. Over 5 days, it made 151 million. So literally, Dial of Destiny made about as much in 3 days than as Kingdom of Crystal Skull made in like two, and then its total, like, what was its total? It was 174 million domestically. That is less than what Kingdom of the Crystal Skull made in, let's see, 9 days. Yeah, 9 days. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the Nuke the Fridge movie, the movie that nuked the fridge that everyone hated, made more in 9 days than Dial of Destiny made total. Just think about that. Think about that for a moment. And worldwide, it was even worse. It made half as much as the last one. It was by far and away definitely the worst performing movie when it comes to ticket sales and just box office in general. And the movie cost 300 million, man. 300 million. Like, this needed to make as much as Kingdom of the Crystal Skull just to be profitable, or even attempt to be profitable. And it did way worse. It barely surpassed its budget. So, yeah, this is definitely the end for Indiana Jones. Obviously, Harrison Ford said he's done with the character. What else can he do with the character? He's like 80 years old. You can only do so much. Yeah, I would not expect another Indiana Jones movie to be made anytime ever. Definitely not in the next like 10, 20 years. And yeah, of Lucasfilm, it's just another L in what is just a sad existence, really. And I know they're supposed to be making some Star Wars movies, but I don't even know if they're going to make any more Star Wars movies, because there have been so many that have been announced and they're either just on indefinite hiatus or just died or just got canned. Like, I don't know anymore. I don't know what's going on. But Lucasfilm, I'm amazed they're still around. I wouldn't be surprised in a few years they just cease to exist. Honestly, I thought after this movie they would just have like a big old a big old like setback, like a big old like meltdown. I thought people would get fired, but surprisingly that didn't happen. But it will happen one day. I'm sure of it. But yeah, Dial of Destiny, huge disaster. Huge disaster. Now it is time for another movie that I'm sad to talk about, but I have to talk about. And that's Dead Reckoning Part 1. Oh, I can't call it that anymore. Sorry. Today it was announced that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning it's going to be on Paramount Plus, and now it's just called Dead Reckoning. Part 1 is no more. Well, actually, I already knew that was going to happen, because Part 2, it's supposed to be Dead Reckoning Part 2, Mission Impossible 8, that got renamed. Well, it hasn't even been renamed yet. It's currently unnamed at this time. So I'm like, okay, they're probably going to retroactively call Dead Reckoning Part 1 just Dead Reckoning, and now it's happened. So, yeah, just wanted to mention that. But yeah, this movie, I expected a lot from this movie. I expected this to be a $1 billion hit. And I had good reason, because one, the Mission Impossible movies, post the third movie, were on a really good track record. They're on a really good path, as I'm about to show you. Like, yeah, Mission Impossible 1 and 2 and 3, and most people thought the series would implode after 3, but they kept going. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, that changed everything. That was a game changer for the series. It was like widely acclaimed, and it was the biggest one in the series. Then Rogue Nation made about the same amount of money, and then Fallout did even better. So these movies were like really well received, and I really thought Dead Reckoning had a shot at making a billion, especially because the previous year, 2022, Tom Cruise had, Top Gun Maverick, the biggest hit of 2022 domestically, made over 700 million domestically. I mean, I could just, show you the list right here. Well, this is like, okay, right here. I mean, look at this. It's number 5 all time domestically. Look at that. It made almost 1.5 billion. Like, that's madness. So I thought for damn sure, that Top Gun Maverick's success would help Dead Reckoning. I thought it'd be guaranteed. There's no reason for this to fail. And yet it did. Like, and when it was coming out, like, after its first few days, like that opening day of 15 million, I was like, this isn't right. I thought this would do way better. What's going on? And second day, like 8 million. I was like, oh god, what is happening? It recovered over the weekend, but only opened like 54 million, which was on the same level as I believe it was Rogue Nation, right? Let me see. Was it on the same level? Let me see. Yeah, same level. Actually, did slightly worse. And it did worse than Fallout, which really surprised me. I'm just like, what the hell, man? Because, like, the movie reaction was really good. I saw the movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. But it just wasn't clicking. And then second weekend, it was over. It fell 65%, mainly because I had to deal with the event that was Barbenheimer. Well, really, I'd say Oppenheimer is the reason why this movie tanked as hard as it did, because Oppenheimer took away all its big screens, all its IMAX screens and everything. It shared the same target audience. So anyone who wanted to see Mission Impossible, they just rather watch Oppenheimer and Barbie too, because Barbenheimer, like, that was just you were not going to compete with that. And to be fair to Paramount, it's not like they knew Barbenheimer would be as big as it was. No one knew it would be as big as it was. No one had a clue just how massive it would be. But yeah, Dead Reckoning Part 1, it only made like 172 million domestic, 566 million worldwide on a budget of 290 million. Another stupidly expensive movie. Like, and it didn't even, it only like barely doubled its budget, so that looks really bad. And for like Mission Impossible standards, like, it did so much worse, quite a bit worse than the previous 3 movies. So yeah, there's a reason why they changed Mission Impossible 8's name. Why it's no longer Dead Reckoning Part 2, and why Dead Reckoning Part 1 is just now Dead Reckoning. So apparently Dead Reckoning, well, the former Dead Reckoning Part 2, that was supposed to be like the last movie, but apparently that might not be the case anymore. But honestly, after the performance of Dead Reckoning, I'd probably end it before things got worse. But you know what? Maybe Mission Impossible 8 has a better shot of success, because there's no Barbenheimer on the calendar, when it comes out in 2025. So it has a better shot of making money. But yeah, Dead Reckoning, it's sad I'm talking about this. It's kind of embarrassing that I thought this would be a $1 billion hit, but I really thought that would be the case, but it wasn't. So yeah, sad failure right here. So we move on to the end of July, where is Haunted Mansion. I am 100% positive no one remembers this movie. It's been like 6 months. No one remembers it at all. It was so forgettable. Like, I remember seeing the trailer for this in front of Oppenheimer, and I was blown away just by how aggressively lame the trailer looked. Like, it looked so just pathetic, honestly. Like, I saw the trailer, and I'm just like, why would I watch this? Why would anyone watch this? Like, there's no reason to. It just looks so just just not good. And when the movie came out, no one saw it, and I was completely unsurprised. It opened with like 24 million, made like 67 million domestically, 114 million worldwide on a budget of over 150 million. That is awful. That is so bad. And hell, it looks even worse compared to the original Haunted Mansion movie with Eddie Murphy. But I gotta find it though. Haunted Mansion, where are you? There, the Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy. That did better, quite a bit better, and it wasn't even a hit to begin with. So the fact that despite 20 years, the new Haunted Mansion failed to make the money that the first Haunted Mansion made, that should tell you all you needed to know. And yeah, it was just another L for Disney. We're not even done with Disney. Like we still have two more L's to talk about with them. Because 2023 was a horrible year to be Disney, and it was supposed to be their 100th anniversary. So yeah, that's pretty ironic. But yeah, Haunted Mansion, no one watched it, no one cared about it, and no one remembers it. It's just a faint memory. So now we move on to August. And I'm not going to talk about Last Voyage of Demeter. It wasn't a big enough flop. Well, it was a big flop. Blue Beetle! Yeah. Our third DC movie. And so we got one more. But for Blue Beetle, this movie had it rough. It really did. Like, again, because of the DCU announcement, this movie was made irrelevant. It was worthless. No reason to watch it. It wasn't going to lead to anything. And there's also the fact that Blue Beetle as a character, barely anyone knows who he is. I only know him because of Injustice 2. Like, he's very much a C-level character in the grand scheme of things. So you have to deal with, lack of, name recognition, brand name recognition with Blue Beetle. Lack of mainstream exposure, big old mainstream exposure. And it's the fact that superhero movies were not doing well at this point. I mean, you had like success stories. The only success stories you had of the whole year were Guardians 3 and Across the Spider-Verse. That was it. So, yeah, there was definitely a case of superhero fatigue going on. And when this came out, no one watched it. It opened with like 25 million, which I believe is the worst out of all the DCU movies. No, well, maybe not the worst, second worst. But 1984 did worse in terms of openings, but then again, that had to deal with COVID and HBO Max. Blue Beetle didn't have to deal with either of those. It did have to deal with those writer strike and actor strikes, though. I feel like that did a number on the movie. It definitely did a number on its PR campaign. So yeah, but worldwide, it is the worst. It's the worst worldwide. Only made 128 million worldwide on a budget of 120 million. So, absolute disaster. And it's kind of sad with this because like the movie, from what I've heard, because I didn't watch it, I didn't care to see it, but what I heard, it's not bad. It's quite all right. And I thought maybe that good reaction would help it, but like Dungeons and Dragons, good reactions, sometimes good reviews don't do shit. They don't help a movie at all. Like if a movie is doomed, no amount of good reception is gonna save it. That was the case for Dungeons and Dragons. That was the case for Dead Reckoning, and that was the case for Blue Beetle. So yeah, this was probably the saddest failure of all the DC movies this year, but it was doomed to fail. It always was. So yeah, nothing else to say about it except that it was a total L, big old L for DC. Strays, I'm not gonna really talk about that because that wasn't a huge flop. But I do find it funny that Strays came out in August. August is considered like the dog days of summer. So I thought Strays coming out and flopping the way it did, I thought it was fitting. And then Gran Turismo, I'm not gonna really talk about that. That did bleh, just a hard meh. Bottoms did not really gonna talk about that. There's no reason to. My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, not gonna really discuss that. Haunting in Venice, can I discuss that? Maybe. I don't know how much this cost. I think it was expensive. Maybe. I don't know. I may need to look it up off screen very, very fast. Just in case. Because, like, this. I mean, this is like the third, movie in the. I don't know how to say this dude's name. Haruk, Haruk, Patrol. I don't know how to say that name at all. I'm sorry. This is like the third one in the series. It, the first one did all right for itself. It did quite good, and made like over 350 million worldwide. This will because there's a pretty solid reason to make more. And Death on the Nile, that movie had to do with a lot. I'm just gonna talk about this movie because why not? Um, that movie had to deal with a lot. It had to deal with multiple delays, like delays that lasted for years because of not only the Disney Fox merger, but also COVID, and also a little bit because of Army Hammer. His scandal where he may or may not have been a cannibal rapist. I said may or may not, okay, but all of that was not good. But Death on Nile came out and it didn't do very well. But I guess Haunting in Venice was already being made, I think. I don't even know. The thing is, I didn't even know this was connected to Death on the Nile and Murder on Orient Express. I had no idea until like it was like I looked into it. I was like, oh, this is the same series. Oh, okay. Okay, this movie only cost like 60 million, but it didn't do well. It just it didn't land. It did worse than Death on the Nile domestically and worldwide. So at this point, I don't think there's any reason to make any more of these movies. Financially, I don't think the studio is willing to make more of these movies. Maybe you can make it into a show or something on like Hulu, but movies, I don't think so. I think it's just done. Now, what's definitely done is Expendables with Expendables. Let's discuss that. Oh man, oof. Yeah. So what happened with Expendables is pretty much what happened with Matrix Resurrections, if anyone remembers that movie. So if Matrix and Expendables started off with their first movies, both movies were hits, although Matrix was revolutionary, Expendables was not, but both started out successful. They had sequels that were successful. But then the third movie, everything went sideways. But with like Expendables 3, that failed. Well, I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, Expendables 1, 2 did all right. Expendables 3 did not do all right. This failed because of, well, a bit of franchise fatigue. There's also the fact that, this movie had a PG-13 rating. It was used as a way to like expand the audience, but all they did was just alienate the audience they already had, and movies felt kind of neutered and sanitized, and so it suffered greatly because of that. And there's also the fact that the movie was leaked online like several weeks in advance. But yeah, the movie did terrible. Opened like 15 million, made like 39 million domestically. Total flop. Huge bomb. Everyone was convinced this would be it for Expendables. No more movies. And I've been hearing about Expendables 4 for a while after that, but I thought it would be one of those movies that gets talked about but never gets made. But it actually got made. And I'm pretty sure now they probably wished it stayed an idea and never went past that because, good God, Expendables 4. Almost 8 million. 8 million. That's half as much as Expendables 3, which was already a huge failure. And domestically only made like 16 million compared to Expendables 3's like 15 million opening weekend. And worldwide only made like 51 million apparently. A fraction of the previous movies. It cost like 100 million, so absolute horror show right here. And yeah, just this movie had to deal with. This movie was screwed because I deal with that 9-year gap between 3 and 4. The fact that 3 was a franchise killer. The fact that a good amount of the cast from the previous movies aren't here, and it's just This movie was definitely one of those sequels where you just ask why. Why make this? Why? Who wanted this? Who wanted more Expendables? And so, yeah, this movie was a total disaster. And I imagine it's probably a contender for like the worst movie of 2023. I didn't see it because why the hell would I watch this? But yeah, an absolute shit show. Don't no Expendables 5, that's definitely not happening ever. If that happens, I will be amazed. I will be stunned beyond belief. So yeah, Expend 4 Bulls wasted everything. Now we move on to the creator. Let's talk about that for a bit. This movie was definitely a victim of the strikes because with the writer's strike and the actor's strike, you couldn't do any promotion. Like writers and actors, they couldn't do any promotion. They couldn't like prop it up or anything. Now for a writer's strike, you could kind of work around that. Actor strike, you can't. Like with a movie like this, you needed like actors to really like the actors to really do publicity, sell it to the audience because this wasn't like backed by a big brand like Paw Patrol or Saw or The Nun or not Expendables. God, not that. Equalizers 3. Those had strong brands. This didn't have a brand, and also the fact that original sci-fi is always risky. You know, because that audience, sometimes they show up to a movie, sometimes they just don't. They just let a movie die. They let it perish. And that's what happened here. Over like 14 million, made like 40 million domestic, 104 million on a budget of 80 million. That's bad. That just straight up bad. But I heard the movie's pretty decent, and I imagine it's probably gonna get a cult following like later on. I can see that happening. But yeah, this movie's failure was pretty sad to witness because I was kind of hoping it would do better, but it didn't. Those strikes did a number on this movie. So, yeah. Yeah, total flop. And then nothing really to talk about in I pressed the wrong thing. Nothing really to talk about in October. I could mention a little bit of Exorcist Believer because it wasn't like a flop, but considering the fact that Universal spent like 400 million getting that IP, like Believer, it should have done better, quite a bit better. It didn't. It was. They probably hoped it would make like Halloween 2018 money, and that did not happen. And now the sequel for this is basically in limbo. It got removed from the calendar. The director left. I feel like that movie's. I thought the whole trilogy is gonna get canned because I feel like, because after Believer, like no one wanted to watch any more Exorcist movies. But yeah, I don't know. But Exorcist Believer, I'm not gonna call it a success. But I'm not gonna call it a flop either. It's that weird middle ground. And with Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm not going to discuss that because I already mentioned Apple, they don't care about box office. That's not relevant to them. What matters is that the movie opens, that it gets some money, and that some money leads to publicity for their Apple TV Plus release. Okay, so that's what I'm not going to talk about in detail. What I absolutely will talk about in detail, The Marvels. I would say this is the biggest flop of 2023, bar even more than The Flash, because like, oh, this movie had so much working against it. I mean, the MCU, it's seen better days. We all know that. I mean, after Endgame, things have taken a real bad turn. I mean, they had some hits here and there, but yeah, just things have not been the same. Like people aren't hyped about Marvel like they used like they once were. And some of their movies have been flopping recently. Like Black Widow, although that deal Disney Plus Premier Access, doing a number on its box office. Shang-Chi did okay for the time, but in the grand scheme of things, didn't do well. Same goes for Eternals. Well, really, Eternals that always did bad. And then you got Ant-Man 3, which underperformed earlier in the year. And don't even get me started on the Disney Plus shows. That's a whole nother can of worms of those, of such masterpieces like She-Hulk and Secret Invasion. And so that was like the first problem: MCU fatigue, superhero fatigue, just general fatigue with that. It's also the fact that this was the sequel to Captain Marvel, which sure made $1 billion, but no one really loved that movie. I saw that original movie. I thought it was really mid, but no one was really like, yeah, I need to see more Captain Marvel. Like no one was really like hyped to see more. There was no anticipation to see more of this character. There's also the fact that, you know, this movie is very much connected to some Disney Plus shows like WandaVision, Monica Rambeau on the right here. And on the left, you have Miss Marvel from the Miss Marvel show. The thing is, like the MCU audience, like only a fraction of that audience watched those shows, especially Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel didn't even do well on Disney Plus. Like it did terrible. So yeah, expect it's one of those situations where it's really exhausting to be a MCU fan because you have to watch all these movies, you gotta watch all these shows, and it's just a lot. It's way too much, even for me. Like the TV shows that did it for me. I was just like, what are we doing, guys? Like it's just too much. And then Secret Invasion with like Nick Fury, like that whole show apparently was a disaster. So yeah, dealing with all the movies and shows being connected to all of that, it just made it a whole mess. And then there's also the fact that Marvel, like they didn't even try with the advertising for this movie. Like this never felt like an event ever, not in the slightest. Like they did a really poor job making me give a shit. I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss how like the final trailer for the movie, like they tried to promote it like this was supposed to be like an in-game type movie. They were like, "Oh, remember Iron Man? Remember Captain America?" Like it was so pathetic. It hurt. It was just so just ugh, cringe. Then the movie came out and expectations were already dropping. Like supposed to open like remember it was like in the 70s, then it dropped to the 60s, then the 50s, and then it bottomed out with 46 million opening weekend, the worst for out of any Marvel movie. It finally beat the Incredible Hulk's record. Held that record for 15 years, finally broken. So the redheaded stepchild of the MCU is no longer the worst performing movie of the franchise, domestically and worldwide. Because the Marvels, oh man, it only got worse after that. Got way worse. It had a weak opening day, kept dropping after that. And then second weekend, Jesus Christ, it fell 78%. Almost 4/5 of its audience gone. Week two. It had the worst drop ever, not just for an MCU movie, but for the worst out of any superhero movie ever in existence. Like, this is an example of like, it felt like originally like the big drop off was like the high 60s. It seems like the new norm is like the high 70s. Like 70% is becoming like a normal thing now when it comes to drop offs. But this is like so just unbelievable. It's truly unbelievable just how bad this movie did. And it just kept dropping after that, and now it's just gone. It only made like 84 million domestically. That's worse than what most Marvel movies make opening weekends. How supposed some Marvel movies do better than that opening day? Like God. And it's worldwide only made like 200 less than 200 million, which again, plenty of Marvel movies made more than that domestically. Some made more than that opening weekends. So it's absolutely horrendous. It is absolute atrocity what happened with the Marvels. And I didn't see it at all. I actually skipped it. I said, you know what? No, I don't think so. I'm just not going to watch it. And I didn't. And apparently, from what I heard, I made the right call because the movie wasn't that very good. And I literally spoiled myself with the end credit scene. I didn't care. But I'm pretty sure most people wouldn't care either because no one watched this movie. And its budget was like 270 something million, but like way less than that. So it was a huge, colossal failure. And there was already like red flags with this. I didn't even mention the Variety article that came out before this movie released, where it was going over like the MCU's just pretty much implosion with like all their projects, like details about certain projects, with like Ant-Man 3 and She-Hulk and this and like some other projects like Blade, coming up. Like it really painted a very ugly picture for Marvel. And yeah, that picture is still quite ugly. you know, so with the future, well, we're never going to see Captain Marvel as a main character in a movie ever again. That's not happening. Um she's going to be a side character. She's been demoted to a side character for life. And with the MCU, I mean, the only movie I really, really want to see is Deadpool 3. After that, it's hard to feel any hype towards the series anymore. Like, I'm starting to think maybe the series should have ended with Endgame, like what most people have been saying. Like, after Endgame, like they just don't know what they're doing. They had no plan. Phase 4 was a waste of time. Phase 4 just happened. But Phase 5 is also just happening, especially now because they had a plan with Kang, but that Kang plan just crumbled thanks to what happened with Jonathan Majors. So I don't know anymore with Marvel. I don't know. I don't think there is a future. I feel like I don't see it making it past the 2020s. I don't see it happening. I feel like it might just end with like Secret Wars and then just be like, okay, we're done. It's over. Especially if any of the future Marvel movies do as bad as this or even worse than this, then I'll be the end of Marvel for sure. But yeah, Marvel's absolute catastrophe. Nothing positive to say. Just ugh. So then we move on. I'm not gonna talk about Next Goal Wins. There's no real point. Now I'm gonna talk about Trolls Band Together. That did meh. Wish wishes it did meh. This did awful. Our last Disney L of 2023 right here. Wish. Ugh, this movie. I mean, already like Disney animated movies, they've been having it rough the last few years. I mean, Onward, that was Pixar, but it's really hard to tell what's a Pixar movie, what's a Disney movie nowadays. Like they feel too similar, and I feel like that's a bad thing. But yeah, like Onward, that was screwed because of COVID, and all the other Pixar movies, like as you know, Luca Turning Red, are all screwed by Disney Plus. And Lightyear was a total flop. Yeah, but Elemental didn't do awful. It kind of saved itself. But when it comes to Disney animated movies, Disney Animation, I mean, Rhea and the Last Lost Drag. I keep forgetting if it's Last or Lost. I'm pretty sure it's Last. Yeah, it is Last. Last Dragon didn't do well at all, although that had to do with Disney Plus Premier Access and the fact that when it came out, like the box office was not alive yet, not in the slightest. It was still very much in COVID hibernation. That's what I'm going to describe it as. Encanto didn't really stick the landing financially. It didn't do great at all. But I mean, it became a hit on Disney Plus, and the show, not the show, the song, we don't talk about Bruno. That was a big hit, and it's kind of become a meme movie, which I mean is better than nothing. Strange World, oh god, that is a historic flop. That hope of like 12 million made like 39 million domestically, 70 million worldwide on a budget of 135 million. That is there's no words to describe how bad that is. So things were not looking good for Disney Animation going into Wish. And the thing is with Wish, like people were trashing on how it looked, like the animation style, which was different than like most Disney movies. Like a lot of Disney movies kind of like look the same nowadays. This tried to do something a little different, which I would commend it for, but the problem is it just looked bad. Objectively, it looked bad. It looked really cheap. It looked worse than movies like, Across Spider-Verse and Last Wish, Puss Boots Last Wish, and Mutant Mayhem. They looked way better than Wish, despite the fact that they cost less than half of which this cost $200 million. I don't know where the fuck that money went because I did not see it on when I saw the trailers. I was not seeing that money on the screen. I don't know where that money went. Maybe it was a money laundering scheme. Who knows? But yeah, wish it was not looking good when it was coming out, and when it came out, oof, it completely tanked. It opened with like 19 million. It's only made like 63 million. I'm pretty sure it's out of theaters at this point. Yep, it is. It's gone. It's made like a little over 200 million worldwide on a budget 200 million. Yeah, bomb, total flop. And then help the movie was just apparently bad. It felt like some people were saying if like this felt like well, this is supposed to be like Disney's 100th anniversary, right? Their 100th, like their celebration. Like this movie was supposed to be that particularly with like the wishing star, like that thing you see on the screen. And people are just saying like this movie felt like like it was made like by committee. Like it felt so corporate. It felt like it had no soul attached to it. Like it no passion. Just felt you could almost say like an AI wrote this, like Chat GPT wrote this. Like that's what I heard. I didn't see it. I had no reason to watch it. But yeah, just another L for Disney. I don't know how many L's they can take. It's only going to be so long before well, we're already been seeing like major damage to Disney like the last few years, but I feel like it's only going to get worse. The more flops they have, the worse it's going to get. So yeah, I don't even know what the next Disney animation movie is. I know they're supposed to make a Frozen 3 and 4. Yep, they're making a Frozen 4 even before Frozen 3 is even out. But even like the future's grim. It's hella grim for Disney. Whether animated movies, well, just Disney in general, it's grim, super grim. So yeah, that was Wish. I'm not gonna talk about Napoleon. Same reason I'm not talking about Codes of the Flower Moon. Gonna move on to we have two more movies to discuss. Yeah, two more. We're almost done. We're almost there. Um, da 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 da. Wonka, moving past that. Okay, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, our last DC movie. The last DCEU movie. This is it. This is the last one. This is how it ends. And it definitely didn't end with a bang. It ended with a really sad, self-inflicted whimper. Because, ugh, this movie had problems to deal with. One of the problems was Amber Heard, because, she was Mara in the first movie. As you know, Amber Heard is probably one of the least liked people in Hollywood, because of her whole situation with Johnny Depp, how initially it seemed like, oh, Johnny was the abuser, but turned out Amber was the abuser. Amber was the villain of that situation. And the whole legal battle ensued that we all watched. It was a big spectacle. And Johnny Depp won that legal battle and humiliated Amber Heard. And because of that, I was just like, I don't want to watch this movie because of Amber Heard. And the thing is, they apparently cut her out significantly because apparently, from what I've heard, because I didn't see this movie, but what I heard, she only has like a little bit of time. Like she's in it for a little bit, then she pieces out for like the rest of the movie, pretty much until she pops back in. So I definitely feel like there were definitely reshoots that cut her character. I bet there were reshoots, but I imagine that was the reason why they had those reshoots to cut her out of the movie. That was like the first problem, but that was like kind of the least of this movie's problems, least severe problem. There's also the fact that, again, like I said, with Shazam and Flash, Blue Beetle, that DCU announcement killed any reason to watch this movie. There's no reason to watch it because it was going to lead to nothing. Absolutely nothing. And there's also the fact that, obviously, superhero movies is just, again, bad year for the genre. And this was not going to change that. So, yeah. So initially, I thought maybe this had a chance because the first Aquaman did really well for itself for some reason. Made $1 billion, the biggest DCU movie, the biggest DC movie period. I still don't know how that happened. I guess people just I guess I don't know. There's been this theory that Aquaman must have had like a really strong female audience because of shirtless Jason Momoa, and it's a pretty solid theory, I would say. That's probably the reason why it made even more money than it probably should have. But Aquaman 2, like the same strategy, it wasn't gonna work twice. So, um, yeah. So Aquaman 2 opened around Christmas. It opened with 27 million, less than half of the first movie. So that's already off to a really bad start. And now it's only made like 110 million so far, way less than half of the first movie. And worldwide, it has been made like 400 million. Again, way less than half of the first movie. So it is the biggest DC movie of the year. You say that, but is that really an accomplishment? Like, to quote Heathers the musical, like this being like the biggest DC movie, it's like being the tallest dwarf. It really is. And yeah, so the DCU, it just it died a death. One of the worst deaths to a franchise I've ever seen. Like usually a franchise dies after one flop. This year the DCU they had four, one after another. Well, five, six, seven, eight, like going all the way back to like Birds of Prey. Like it's just been nonstop flops. The last real hit was the first Shazam, and after that it was just bombs away. And it ends with this. Like this is the funeral for the TCU. This is how it dies. So yeah, sad end for this series. Definitely, you know, it's it's what the hell happened with the DCU, man? It had so much potential, and all of that potential was lost thanks to constant bad decisions. And I feel like it's going to be used as an example of how not to create a cinematic universe, how not to run a franchise. And hopefully the DCU, starting with Superman Legacy, hopefully that's good. Hopefully we don't have to deal with another shit show again. But we won't know until next year, so we'll see. But yeah, Ant-Man, Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom, yeah, total flop. I'm not surprised. Migration, not gonna really talk about that. It's not doing great at all, but it's not doing like awful. It's just doing meh. Bleh. Now, Color Purple, let's talk about that. This movie really perplexes me because it opened really well opening day. Had an 18 million opening day on Christmas. That's one of the biggest opening days ever for Christmas. And I'm like, okay, this movie is gonna pop off. This movie's gonna be a hit. And then it just fell off the face of the earth afterwards so fast. Like 11 million opening weekend. That's less than what it made on one day. And then after that, 60%, 61%. It's gone. It's gone now. And this movie apparently cost like $90 million. So yeah, it's a huge flop. And I still don't know what went wrong. I'm not positive what went wrong. Maybe just the audience had like, I think in my December recap, I mentioned had like kind of like that Tyler Perry audience where like back when Tyler Perry was like pumping out movies, that audience showed up like opening weekend and then they just disappeared afterwards. And I believe the same thing kind of happened here. Well, that's my theory. That's the only theory I got. That the target audience like were the type to see it. You know, they were quick to see it, but then after that they just dipped. So yeah, but Color Purple, it was a flop. A flop that I didn't really expect after opening day. I thought this would be a certified 100 million movie, but turns out no. And then last, we have Ferrari. Ugh, this movie had no real shot of success, had no publicity, no real anything. And it opened with like 2.8 million on Christmas, less than 4 million opening weekend. Now it's made 17 million. It's not going to get past that. It's made like 35 million on a budget of 95 million. Terrible. But I'm not surprised. Again, no one cared. And there were so many other options, you know, when during the holidays. Like this was like near the bottom of people's options. So yeah. And that's it for 2023. Thank God. It's over. So now we're in 2024. I don't know what's going to happen because 2024 already got wrecked thanks to those strikes. And there's no movie that I can confidently say will hit $1 billion. But then again, I didn't expect Barbie or Mario to make $1 billion. So anything could go down. Anything can happen. But right now, it's not looking good at all. But so yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I'll make my 2024 recap the same time next year, I would imagine. But yeah, so that's it. That's all. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, leave a comment, turn on notifications, share the whole drill. I'll check out more videos like this. I got playlists on the homepage, all previous recap videos I made on the channel. You want to watch the first part of my 2023 recap, all the winners. You want to watch any of the past recap videos I've done on the channel, you can go right ahead. There's also box office predictions, or I predict box office for movies. Any movie I covered in detail or relative detail in this video, I made a prediction video for. So you want to watch any of those prediction videos or any of the other ones I've done on the channel, you can go right ahead. There's also the canceled series where I go over all the movies that were supposed to come out but didn't. I've made 228 episodes of canceled. I know I'm going to wait to make episode 229 because it's way too late to make it now. I'm just going to wait till something else happens before making that video. So yeah, that's in the works. So stay tuned for that. But if you want to watch any of the past cancel episodes I made, all 228 episodes, you want to binge them all from the beginning to now, I highly encourage you to do that. So go do it. And yeah, that's it. That's all. I am out. Goodbye.